Hey everyone, welcome to the Ciso Talk podcast. I hope you're doing great, good, awesome, amazing. You're staying healthy, you're staying safe, you're finding your spot in the uncertainty of today. I've got a very, very, very special guest on today's show. He's an author, he's a CISO, he's a professor. If this guy had any more jobs, and he has a family, so I don't know how he does it all. Joining me is the one, the only George Finney, the CSO for SMU, Southern Methodist University. I said it right first take. I love it.
Dude, good job.
Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, James. It's great to be here. I've been listening to your podcast for a while, and awesome to be a part of it.
Well, I'm excited to have you on because I got to read your book, and we're going to talk about your book a ton because you talk about.
Cool.
For those who don't know George will briefly describe himself, but he is the author of a great book that I think everyone should pick up. Master the Nine Cybersecurity Habits to Protect Your Future. Great 9 steps. It's an airplane read. If you fly, if we were flying nowadays, this book would be a great airplane book, because by the time you board your flight until the time you land and get off the plane, if you're not one of those people that stands up right when the plane lands because you think somehow you're going to be the first to get off the plane when you're in row 27, and you actually read this book until you get off the flight, you'll finish the book by the time you take off and land.
WellAware is coming out on October 20th. So mark your calendars and buy a copy before it comes out. That's really helpful to us authors.
If they pre-order it.
If they pre-order it, yeah.
You'll send me the link where they can pre-order the book.
I'm going to take it to do action item to send you that.
So for those that are listening, you want to pre-order the book, support people within our local Infosec community who are publishing authors. The link is going to be below in the description of the audio podcast. If you're watching us on YouTube, the link is in the description below. Just go there. You'll also find the link on our website at cyberhubpodcast.com. Make sure you subscribe and rate us, because if you don't subscribe and you don't rate us, we don't go up in the ranking, folks. And we do need your help there. So it's really easy. Subscribe, and that's that. So, George, beyond the fact that you're a Cowboys fan, which we'll have to talk about later today, if we get a chance to talk about football, we'll get there. It'll bring some level of normalcy to life after 5 months of just uncertainty. Tell us a little bit about how you got into cyber.
So, like a lot of folks in cyber, I didn't start out with a plan to go into cybersecurity. I started out my career really in the telecom space. So I worked for GTE back before they were Verizon. I worked for SBC before they bought AT&T. Networking, I loved it. I got all the Cisco certs, and I got this opportunity to go broaden my horizons and be kind of a network architect or sysadmin at a startup. And so I started learning Linux and custom compiling my own code. But I also had to be the guy to harden systems and to run the firewalls and to do all of the other security work. I thought that was cool. And then I got this opportunity to go to law school. That's why I came to SMU. They launched their evening law program, and I thought, okay, I can kind of keep doing this. And maybe I'll go be a patent attorney or something and work with technology inventors. And as it turns out, I got this offer to stay at SMU and can kind of combine my passion for cybersecurity with this experience of being an attorney. So looking at policy or contracts or compliance, those kinds of things. There's just such a neat connection between all of those. I've kind of over time become more of a generalist, but really, the passion is just about understanding things and being able to kind of explain them to the folks I work with.
The interest of the background of how people get into cyber is always fascinating, right? Because people get into cyber from all kinds of places. I've spoken to people who've done it from the military, people who've come from, that aspect, people who come from the education background, people who go and get a cert, people who get thrown into cyber. I can tell you how many CISOs I've met that are like, how'd you end up getting into cyber? I was working for a company. They wanted someone to handle security. I volunteered, and here I am 15 years later.
Well, and to me, that's the best story. I mean, I know we need to have cybersecurity as something we teach in universities or even at a high school level, but I wouldn't ever want that to be a detriment to someone getting into cyber to have a degree or a cert. I think really the best cybersecurity folks are just the ones that are curious. They're hungry to understand. They're willing to stand up a lab in their house, with a server or a firewall or what have you, and run Kali or Metasploit. That's the kind of folks that we need, because they're not waiting to be spoon-fed. And cyber evolves so quickly. You're going to have this commitment to lifelong learning that you wouldn't have to have in another career, right? If you're an accountant, the accounting standards have been the same for the last, 50 years, 100 years. But technology, we're always on the bleeding edge of technology and security. So, if you're excited about that and can embrace it, that's I think the coolest reason to get into cybersecurity. We're always doing something new. It's never the same. And for some, that might be something that scares them away. But the rest of us are weird enough to not be bothered by that.
Well, some people are, they want the set life, and others like us are crazy. I haven't really had proper sleep in, 4 years.
It's true, yeah.
There's a difference. It just exists. When we talk, as we talk a little bit about, your background and so forth, when you're building a team, as you're hiring people, what are some of the skills you look for in people who you want to bring onto your team? What are some of kind of the stuff that really matters to you?
So I think the biggest question I ask when I'm hiring folks is, why do you want to work at SMU, right? And it's that why that matters, I think, the most, because if somebody's got an impressive enough resume to be talking with me, they could go anywhere. They can get a job with a bank, with a cybersecurity firm, with a healthcare, and what's going to stop them in a year or two from moving on? It's really that why. Why do you want to be here? Are you going to send your kids to school at SMU? Do you want to go back and get your degree here? Is being in an academic environment, working with faculty members, something that interests you? It's really about the why and understanding what drives the person. I think communication and relationships are some of the best skills to have in cybersecurity. So I ask them, kind of non-technical questions, and the technical questions. I ask some really difficult, interview questions, and most people can't answer some of the trick questions I'll throw in. But again, even with that, what I'm looking for is someone's ability to say I don't know, and that's okay, because an interview is a weird place. If it wasn't an interview, you would be able to go out and Google it. But just the fact that I think personality matters so much, and fit. I have to understand how a person's gonna interact on a team, what the role is. I really want to see the whole person.
Is there a type of skill that you think is kind of really important in order for CISOs, CSOs to have in terms of leading their team? That's kind of that X factor. What's that X factor skill or quality that a CISO needs to be a successful leader?
So for me, and I talk about this in the book, I think finding your blind spots and looking for them is such a hard skill to know, because our brains are wired to just assume that we have all of the knowledge that we need to have in order to make a decision, there's an evolutionary reason why that's important to have. However, it's so easy to not know to look in a certain place, and so some of that comes with experience, knowing where the blind spots are, or where the bones are buried, or what have you. But really, just having that sixth sense, maybe that's about embracing diversity and being able to build a team that can complement one another and find those blind spots. Maybe that's about being able to be patient and ask questions to really drill in and to get a sense of, when you're talking to someone about building requirements for a project, you can feel out to know where the blind spots are going to be. I think finding your blind spots and is kind of a key characteristic.
We look at a CSO, CISO role, and it's very different from industry to industry, right? In manufacturing, the predominant title now is a CSO, not a CISO, because they've put, security under the manufacturing lamp. And financial services, it's still a CISO, and those people still struggle to get in the mature financial services organizations, they get their board time, but they still struggle within the executive leadership of getting the right amount of attention and resources for their programs predominantly. I think Capital One this week kind of made every board go, all right, it's $80 million, it's not so bad. And other industries. So how does a CSO really work within the academia? Who do you report to? What kind of interaction do you have with, faculty, with administration? How's your role maybe different than that of your peers?
So, I think, it definitely varies from university to university. We're all kind of, I think, on a different, maturity path, depending on, how big a school you are, what kind of funding you have. So a community college is going to have a very different security role than an Ivy League, for example, and SMU is kind of somewhere in the middle. But I would say, today I report into the CIO, and CIOs at different universities. A lot of us report into CIOs, but we're typically reporting to a vice, or the CIO is typically reporting into a vice president of business and finance, or maybe some I've seen report into to the library system. Some I've seen report into internal audit, or maybe the academic area. So it really varies based on the relationships I think you build inside your organization. And for me, we've built a very strong partnership and relationship with our police department, with risk management, with business and finance, with legal. I get to have different conversations with our legal team because I'm an attorney, and they're kind of willing to have kind of more candid, I think, conversations about things that are going on in the environment. So I would say in a way, if there's a difference, in a university setting, it's much more simple or straightforward for me to have conversations direct with folks, whoever they are on the team. Even if I don't report them, I'm not necessarily stepping on people's toes by going to have a conversation. I think that would probably be different at a huge state school, or a top 10 university. But for us, everybody's really approachable. They want to do the right thing. They want to protect our community. And I kind of see myself as more of a coach. So I've got a small team. My team does both cybersecurity as well as running technology for physical security, like cameras or card readers. So that's kind of why we picked. My title is actually Chief Security Officer, not Chief Information Security Officer, because there's kind of a broader implication of what the job title was going to involve. And I also, on reflecting, I didn't think of this beforehand when we were negotiating the title, but I also now share the same title with Lieutenant Commander Worf on Star Trek. So I've kind of advanced that far in my career. So I like hanging my hat on Mr. Worf.
That's really awesome. That's a great way to look at it. I think you're the first CSO to say that on the show. So you're the first real geek to pull that out of their pocket.
Well, I've got Mr. Worf right over here, so you know.
Well, I love your background, by the way. I mean, just the background's awesome. I mean, I've got my background. I'm an aviation guy, right? So I have a ton of planes and books, and that's about it. And then I've got some dancing rabbis. But that's kind of like my jig. That's a little bit about my personality, right? Everyone's got something about them that's always kind of in the background. And if they've got a plain white background, they've got no personality.
That's scary. I don't trust people who don't have a personality, because they have a personality. They're just hiding it from you.
Right. And you're curious. You're like, why don't you want to show me about your personality? What is it about your personality that you're hiding? It's okay. You can put a Cowboys poster behind you. No one's going to make fun of you. George, you wrote a book that comes out real soon, WellAware Master the Nine Cybersecurity Habits to Protect Your Future. What drove you to really go about and write this book?
So, I'll tell you the long story. So I've always had this passion for writing. So, stupidly, I went to law school. And by the way, I operate a 1-800 number for talking people out of going to law school. So if you need that help as a service, I offer that to the community.
Is it free?
It's a free service. Call me day or night. No.
So parents, if your kids want to be lawyers, reach out to George, get his 800 number, tell your kids don't go to law school.
Don't. So, for me, I was working full time during the day. As an engineer, I'm on call 24/7, and now I'm going to law school for 10, 11 credit hours a semester, because they make you do it all at once, and they don't give you extra time just because you're an evening student. So that was a challenge, right? And I kind of realized, like, I'm burnt out. I don't want to do this much work anymore. And I want it to be fun and do something that I can get behind. And then, so I reignited my passion for writing. So I wrote a couple fiction novels. I published one. I self-published on Amazon, and I thought it was fun, but after a few years, I really wanted to start, kind of merging my two passions in cybersecurity and writing. And so I wrote this book. My first cybersecurity book was No More Magic Wands. If most people probably haven't read it, but it's kind of like Who Moved My Cheese for cybersecurity. So it's kind of a case study in a tree full of magic elves that make magic wands, and they get hacked, and they have to unhack themselves, but they can't use magic to fix all of their problems. So what do? You actually start, building a team and working together. And, I'm picturing like the Keebler elves, like that's literally what I was kind of picturing. But, they have kind of adventures solving their cybersecurity issues. And, I wanted to write something non-technical that would really, build a bridge between CISOs and other executives. Because when you're an executive, right, you read these books for professional development, whether it's like, Jim Collins' Good to Great or Stephen Covey's 7 Habits. And so, I've been thinking along these lines for a few years, and I wanted to kind of delve deeper. And I'm as a CISO, I've been personally very frustrated with what's available out there for security awareness and to help change people's behaviors. And when you think about people's behaviors, really that boils down to habits. So I've identified what I think are 9 clusters or constellations of smaller habits that I think if you can train people on that framework, right? And we love frameworks in cybersecurity. But NIST really doesn't apply to me as an individual, right? It helps me organize as an organization, but how do I change as an individual? I think, first you have to understand that there are habits, and then, you have to, if you've read Tiny Habits or The Power of Habit, BJ Fogg or Charles Duhigg, they focus on the actual process of implementing those into your life. And everybody's different. We all have different ways of incorporating those habits or doing different things to stay secure. And there are lots of ways to do that. So I don't mandate any one way, but I think the goal was to tell the stories of successful leaders who have implemented those kinds of habits, so that we can emulate them. And we so focus on the negative in cybersecurity. We want to avoid the breach. We want to find out what not to do. And as it turns out, we focus, on fear. And the challenge with using fear as a motivator is it's really good to motivate people not to do something, but it's hard to get them proactively to do things. And I think the way to get folks to proactively change is to emulate those successes and to focus on habits as a step-by-step process. So that's my pitch for the book.
Well, I got a chance to look over the book, and it's a great book, and we're going to talk about the 9 habits that people need. You and I, when we started our conversation before we started recording, we spoke of habit number 2, which for those that listen to the show quite often realize like that is totally me, right? But you kind of look at security and in general, you look at, you talk about the 9 habits. Of the 9 habits, what habit do you spend the most time on? And we're going to go over the 9 habits here in just a moment.
In detail,
the one.
I didn't know there was going to be a quiz at the end. I think there are 2 habits for me that are really hard to separate out, and I think they're both extremely important. And the first one is culture, and the second one is community. So technically speaking, culture is habit 5 if you're following along at home, and community is habit 7. I think. Are you still with me, James?
Yeah, I'm with you. I got you.
Okay.
We had a little connection issue here. We blame it on dolphins all the time.
Okay. I'll kind of start that over. So I think the one of the most important habits, or 2 of them, are community and culture, and they go hand in hand, really. But I would say cybersecurity is a team sport. So you can't, play your cards close to the vest. You can't do it all yourself. So for me, I've got a small team at SMU, but I like to say that we've got 2,500 cybersecurity employees, because I believe strongly that security is everybody's job. And so if you believe that cybersecurity is everybody's job, you want to find a way to be more like a coach to coordinate people's activities together, right? You don't see NFL coaches, after the game, saying, "Oh, well, we lost the game because of that stupid person. If only we could get rid of him." And maybe they do, maybe they think that way, but they'll come out and say things like, we tried really hard, the other team was good that day. On the flip side, you don't hear an NFL coach, sitting down and saying, well, the reason we won today is because of the new gloves that our players were wearing, or the new cleats, or the football, or whatever. That's what we're doing in cybersecurity, by the way. We focus entirely on the technology. The reason we stopped the hackers today was because of X product, and we completely discount the players. We say people are the weakest link, and they're always going to get us in trouble, and we want to get rid of all of our customers or employees or whatever, and finally our cybersecurity challenges will go away. That is opposite from a coach mindset, and I think embracing that can influence both community as well as culture in our organizations.
Yeah, culture and community have a lot to do with security. So for those listening or watching, here are the 9 habits in the book, and we're going to talk about them a little bit. It's literacy, skepticism, vigilance, secrecy. Number 5, which you've already shared, culture. Number 6, which is diligence. 7, you've already spoke about briefly right now, community. 8 is mirroring, and 9 is deception. And number 9 is of most interest. Obviously, we're going to leave number 9 to the end of the podcast, because I want people to listen all the way through. We got to increase our listening average on the show. And so listen all the way through, folks, because we'll talk about deception. And I know Tony Cole would just be dying to jump on the deception conversation, because that's just his wheelhouse.
I actually know Tony. I actually interviewed him for the book. His interview did not make it in, but yeah, he's definitely an interesting cat.
So who made it in the book?
So I actually talk about a couple of different folks, and I know we want to save the deception, preview for the end, but Umesh is in the book. He kind of talks specifically about his deception stuff today that he's doing, kind of using modern deception. And then Lance Spitzner, he was the founder of the Honeynet project back in 2000 or so. Some of the work they did on the Know Your Enemy series, just standing up random honeypots across the world, really cool insights. And I'll stop there because that's the sneak preview to deception. But
that is the sneak preview to deception. If we start from the very beginning, literacy. Yes, you need to learn how to read in cyber, but that's not what you mean by literacy. Literacy has a completely different definition in the book, which is you got to understand that your environment is constantly changing and you've always got to learn, right? And you said that early on, like people who get into security, they can't be lazy. This isn't an accountant job. Stuff's constantly changing. Talk a little bit more about literacy in terms of how does it really come into terms for a cybersecurity practitioner and professional?
So I think about literacy both in terms of cybersecurity practitioners as well as non-technical folks, right? Because we all have to be cybersecurity literate to some extent. But literacy, the technical definition of literacy, isn't that you know everything already and you've read all the books in the world. It just means that you have the foundation, the foundational literacy in order to go out and think about reading a book or an article or a conversation. So cybersecurity literacy, I think it's that foundation of understanding of knowledge, knowing what the good sources are out there, knowing how to get information, even if it's just a matter of having a mentor or a coach to help you along. So you can be a cybersecurity practitioner and not be an expert pen tester, for example. But I think you could sit down in a room with a pen tester and understand what they're talking about. I think that's what cybersecurity literacy is in a nutshell.
And there's a whole chapter on literacy in the book, and it's actually a very eye-opening chapter because it really does talk a little bit about being fearless in your learning and really kind of throwing yourself into just the whole idea of just learn, don't be afraid to learn, and again, you're a professor, an author, and you work at a university, so it's very eye-opening to see you put the focus on literacy and education as being the number one habit, your top one habit. And I don't know if these habits are listed in kind of priority, like 1's really important and 9 is just for fun, or but this does say something about kind of people's idea of doing so.
Well, and you have to start with literacy, and I think one of the reasons for this concept of fearless learning is when we are afraid, our cognitive faculties actually start to shut down, and we don't learn as well, right? So if we're teaching others, if we're learning from others, if we're in a state of fear, if there's fear of reprisals, if there's fear of even losing your job, that uncertainty reduces your ability to understand and to cognate, right? So I think getting rid of fear in cybersecurity should be one of our number one missions in life right now.
And again, this chapter is fascinating for me because it covers a bunch of different things, from fearless learning to really securing your brain, which is a very interesting concept, to self-awareness. And I think self-awareness is one of those things that a lot of times in security, we almost lose track of it. And, it's last week I actually did an in-person event.
Right on. Cool.
Right? There were 20 people there. And it was half in person, half virtual. But the people that were there were great people, great conversation. At the end of the event, there was a cocktail party, and a sales representative from an MSP approached me, and he went, James, I'd love to pick your brain. And I said, sure. There's a reason I tell the story. It plays right into self-awareness. And he goes, when you're building a program, what framework do you use? He goes, I really like the NIST CSF. And he goes, when I meet with customers, I'm always talking about the NIST CSF. And I go, okay, that's great. The NIST CSF is a very good framework, but does it fit everyone? I go, if you're meeting with a business that has 100 people and they don't have a CISO, you're an MSP. They're bringing you in so that you can run their IT because they probably don't even have an internal IT guy. You think they're going to sit there and hear the NIST CSF and look at the documentation and go, wow, let's do this?
Yeah.
Are you complexing security to a point where people get turned off by security, which is part of the problem? Or should you maybe revert to the CIS top 20? You mentioned in your self-awareness part of the book, you talk a lot about the CIS. And to me, the CIS produces the CIS controls. And if you look at the top 20 controls and you just do the top 8 or 9 of them, you've pretty much established really good blocking and tackling for your security program. So in an organization like that, why do you even go to the NIST CSF? Why not qualify your customer on the CIS controls?
And I think, I mean, we I don't know, it seems like we spend so much time mapping controls and frameworks to one another. We've got whole job categories of folks that's all they do. I think you're right, especially for small teams, you've got to focus. And you either pick one framework and go with it. You fit what meets your needs, prioritize it. The reason, one of the reasons I love the CIS top 20 is it's not actually the top 20. They've got like a top 20 categories, but when you get down into the details, they actually will tell you, well, here are the top 5 or 10 things for category 1. And they actually have, real kind of hard examples on how to have metrics around those. So you can actually have, kind of a higher level insight into your inventory controls or your, whatever control you want to focus on.
I've taken the CIS top 20. I've put it on an Excel.
Easy.
I've mapped every single category under each one of those controls. And so when you're going into an organization, when I'm speaking to, friends of mine that run a small business, advertising companies, whatever it is, and they go, James, how to secure myself? I print out my Excel sheet. I've translated it from a bit more complex to, and I ask them, are you on Office 365 or Gmail?
Right.
Because I've got my Excel separated. If you're on Office 365, the implementation of those things is very different than if you're on G Suite for Business.
Totally. Even if, take it at a more, even simpler level, right? How many organizations have an actual risk register? I was at a roundtable with other CISOs last year, and, out of, I think 20 people in the room, maybe 3 or 4. And these are organizations with CISOs. I would say, that self-knowledge, is incredibly key. How do you know what to protect if you don't know where your information is? How do you control it?
So that's a great point, because that's the point of, yesterday was Patch Tuesday.
Right.
I have another podcast, the CyberHub podcast, and I do a practitioner brief. Every morning it's a 5-minute podcast, and it talks about your basic blocking and tackling and security. Not clickbait headlines. Like, I didn't cover the $80 million fine by Capital One, because really there's no news there. They got fined $80 million, right?
Yeah.
But when you look at a patching, one of the things I always tell people when it comes to a patch, I go, the manufacturer will rank it a 9.8. It's critical. You got to do it now. Now, is that component critical? Does that software really integrate with your data? Is it processing the kind of data or kind of business processes where if you don't patch it, you stand the risk of if you're attacked, that your business goes offline? Or is it so thrown to the side? Is it so seldom used that you can put this on a priority to do it in a week or 2? And right now you got to focus on what the manufacturer calls a 4.0 severity, but for you, it's a 10.0 severity, because a lot of your business functions are critical to that specific unit.
That's exactly right. And you mentioned MSPs earlier, but even with pen testers, right? When they provide those results back to you, are you able to, or are you going through the process of actually mapping those controls out to see, okay, well, yeah, this was a 9.0, but we think because we have these other compensating controls and there's no actual data on that server that it's actually a 2, and we want to focus on these 5 other high priority issues first. How do you have that nuanced conversation when you've got these kind of red flags like I got to focus on the 9s and 10s first. If it's black and white like that, if you don't have that self-knowledge like you mentioned, it's going to be a struggle. And it's really going to be a struggle for outside entities that don't have that same insight into your organization, that don't have that same self-knowledge.
Yeah, that's such a great point is, if you're not mapping, if you're not really understanding where your stuff is, if you don't have visibility and you're just patching based on what the manufacturer ranks as it's critical. If your patch Tuesday is, I get 0 days, right? We all understand the need for a 0 day to get patched immediately, but everything else, is it really critical to your organization, or are you just patching for the sake of patching?
Right.
And then you're wasting critical time in patching stuff that you may not need, and then getting to something that's really critical for your organization. Your second point is skepticism. That's me. That's right there. I'm a very skeptic person, right? Like, I'm half Israeli, half American, so by nature I'm skeptical of everything.
I don't see this, your tinfoil hat on your desk behind you. Is that?
I don't have tinfoil hats. I'm not that skeptic, right? I mean, I'm not. There's probably aliens, but I don't know. I've watched all the videos of the spacecrafts, with the Air Force, encountering these stuff, and I've got some questions, but I'm skeptic also, right? Like, could China be that far advanced? Could that be our own Air Force? Could it be Space Force? Could Space Force have been like something that started during George W. Bush and no one knew about it until Trump came out and was like, Space Force, yes, my legacy, turn it on, let everyone know we've got Space Force.
It turns out that it's actually a really boring TV show, so I don't recommend the Netflix Steve Carell. I was looking forward to Space Force so much.
I watched half of an episode. I saw it to be way, way too political, and I was like, "You're ruining it. You're ruining it."
There weren't enough jokes. I mean, it's rife with humor, and they just lost it.
They missed it. They missed the ball on that one. So talk a little bit about skepticism in your book, in terms of, you talk a lot about the zero trust model. I'm a skeptic of zero trust because I don't believe you can do business in zero trust, right? And so again, in the book, I kind of try and tell stories, right? I want to tell the stories of successful leaders or other luminaries that you can use their stories to help emulate. And so I got to interview John Kindervag, who was the guy behind the industry buzzword zero trust, from Palo Alto.
So he's at Palo Alto now. He created he coined the term while he was at Forrester, and fascinating story. But he acknowledges that there's this concept of we anthropomorphize the network, right? So you think of George's computer, you think of George's packets, and that's a problem, right? And that's kind of what zero trust solves. But he's quick to say also that you trust people, not packets, right? So while we're talking about computers, that could be anybody using that computer. But it's you still rely on people and humans, and so that's I shift from the story of John Kindervag to the story of Stephen Covey, who wrote this book, The Speed of Trust. And most leaders that you talk to will have encountered the speed of trust at some point. But they talk about how there is a tax. There's a trust tax, and if you don't have trust, business slows down. You're less profitable. And you have challenges. You can't get deals done.
Well, and it's bad for your culture. I hate to cut you off, but then it goes directly against number 5 and number 7.
And so I talk a lot in the book about simulated phishing that we do, right. and there's the reason is we have a lot of data, but that was one of the biggest hurdles I think that I had in that program, and that I talked to other CISOs about. Well, I can't do that because our organization won't accept it, right? There are too many issues. We'll piss people off. We don't want to influence the culture negatively by having people stop responding to email. There some organizations send daily or weekly simulated phishing messages, and I think you can go overboard, and maybe that's a little too much. But really, I think skepticism comes down to you have to walk a fine line in cybersecurity with telling truth to power, it's easy for us to be the boy who cried wolf. If you're seen as the boy who cried wolf all the time, you lose any ability to influence the organization, right? They're going to stop listening to you. So how do you approach skepticism in a way that builds trust and builds relationships and connections? I think the way that Stephen Covey in his book talks about it, trust isn't a spectrum. Right, it's not untrust on one side and trust on the other. What his proposal is that skepticism is actually a matrix, and so you can have low or high trust. You can also have low or high skepticism at the same time, and you need both at the same time in order to have good judgment.
No, I mean it's brilliant. To me, skepticism, you talk a little bit about, trusting your gut. And there's so much to that statement, right? Because we live in the cyber world, we live in the world of what I like to call false positive alerts. And if you just trust false positives, or if you just trust an alert and you don't listen to your gut, you're not watching a pattern, you're just clicking, right, to dismiss the alerts, or you're saying done, just, getting it down your checklist. If you're not trusting your gut, you're inherently failing in your job as a security person. Like, your gut, I don't know how to say it. Every time something's happened, it's been in my gut. I've smelt it. I knew it was coming. Winter was right there. I'll quote the head of the Israeli INCD. I was on a conference call with him. It was a panel, and he said, winter is coming. And he said that about 2 months ago, when the first attack on the Israeli water system took place. When the Iranians tried to put more chlorine in the water, get people sick, they attacked the civilian infrastructure for the very first time. Typically, they were known to go after, state infrastructure, state data. It was the first time they attacked civilian infrastructure. And it kind of changed the game. Right? It really did change the game. In fact, I'm doing a podcast with several friends from the CIA and from Israel just on the way Iran and Israel are now in a fully fledged open cyber warfare, and how it's affecting different organizations that operate within both nations and in between and within the supply chain.
Yeah.
So, when I say I'm skeptic because of the stuff that you see. And that stuff, by trusting your gut. He said it. He goes, my gut said it all. He goes, winter's coming, and it's coming sooner than we expected.
Yeah. And, but you, again, can't be the guy that's been saying winter is coming for the last, 10 years.
Well, we all know the Chicken Little story.
Well,
the sky's falling,
right.
The sky's falling. Eventually, the sky fell.
So, I mean, again, I think it's a big challenge to do right. But if done right, I think you can dispel the myths that we have in security. And I think we tell ourselves that we think we know, the answers when, maybe we haven't done the due diligence to know really what the science says behind it, or what the big data would say when we applied it to a different situation.
Well, listen to your gut goes right into vigilance, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they play right into each other.
So I struggled with whether or not skepticism and vigilance are the same habit or two different habits. So I think of vigilance as kind of an applied skepticism, right? So you can't be, I think that we have this expectation in cybersecurity that we will be, I think the term security awareness implies we're enlightened and we're meditating and floating on air, and we're aware of all the things all at once. And actually, the way we work, and again, I think people are getting the point that I've looked at a lot of psychology and neuroscience, and I talk about that a lot in the book. But I think vigilance is a focused skepticism, right? You only have so much focus or awareness to direct at a given task, and generally speaking, that focus, if you don't focus, you kind of get lost in a lot of details. So that focus allows you to be successful at whatever vigilant task you need to be. But it starts with the foundation of skepticism, and you focus it on the different areas that you run across in your life.
Absolutely. And to me, vigilance, by the way, attention to detail, to me that stuff is just, to me they come together, right? My skepticism gets me to pay attention to detail. It gets me to be a little bit more aware. It also keeps me smiling. Believe it or not, your keep your friend upside down piece, and you talk about the movie The Pursuit of Happiness. It's one of my all-time favorite movies in the book. Is you keep your friend upside down. So as you're looking, as my skepticism is there, I'm smiling, and people always look at me weird, especially since I've been working from home. My wife will come downstairs and she'll be like, "What are you smiling about?" And I'm like, "I think I found something.
Yeah.
Right. And so to me, they come together, and I know you have them two separate ones, and that's the beauty of the book. You really do highlight it, and you're able to interpret it any way you really want to go down that route. I mean, you talk a lot about the socks in there, and you talk a lot about the different things that go on in different APTs. But at the end of the day, vigilance is not only knowing your enemy, it's also understanding, goes back to number one, to your literacy, right?
Yeah.
Understand what you've got, so that way when you're skeptical about something, you've got the vigilance to pay attention to it, which then takes into secrecy.
Yeah. So secrecy is I don't know. I've kind of defined it as the dividing line between that which should be public and that which should be private, right? I think instinctively. So I give this talk at conferences from time to time, and I'll ask the crowd, okay, so if you're listening to the podcast at home, follow along, right? I want you to turn to the next person next to you. If you're not sitting next to someone, I want you to blog it or put it on LinkedIn, but I want you to tell them your deepest, darkest, most intimate, embarrassing secret. And, obviously nobody in the conferences will actually do that, and it gets a big laugh. But the takeaway there is, when I said, hey, tell someone your most deepest, darkest, and most intimate secret, it took zero time for you to know what that was, whatever it was, right? You knew instantly, and because it's personal, right? Right? And so that's easy. Where it gets difficult is we're in these weird corporations or companies that we don't necessarily have that same personal connection to whatever the secrets are. And I think it's kind of our job as security people to help them make that more personal, right? Because when something's more personal, and they've done research in a lot of different ways, whether hospitals or in national parks or whatever, when something's personal to you take it more seriously, and you're more effective at protecting it than if it were just random data that you don't care about. That's I think the secret of secrecy.
I like the idea of secrecy. You do tell the story of Apple and Steve Jobs, and as a person who's surrounded by Apple products and embedded with Microsoft software, I enjoyed reading that part of the book.
There's a great. It actually comes from Steve Jobs' biography, but there's this great story. I mean, people forget that Steve Jobs and Bill Gates were partners at one point. And so when Jobs, they had software code delays, right? They weren't able to release their operating system on time, and Gates was one of their contractors, and Gates was like, okay, cool, I'll sign your non-compete for a year, So they signed that agreement, and of course, with Apple's delays, Bill Gates had the opportunity to release his OS first, and he did. And so there's this great meeting between the two of them, and Steve Jobs is like, Bill, you stole this from me. You stole it out from. What are you doing? And Bill's like, dude, we both broke into the same house at Xerox, and we both stole their TV. I just got there first. So it's this fascinating, kind of, whose secret is it at what time? And sometimes we manage it with contracts. Sometimes we, manage it with copyright or patents or whatever. So the controls, I think, are all variable, right? We choose how to protect our secrets, whatever they are. The folks at KFC have their 21 herbs and spices. Oh my gosh, if that ever leaked out, what would happen to us? But that we all have that we're trying to protect, and I think we know instinctively the things that we care about, and we do a good job protecting them.
Secrecy takes us to culture. And culture is a really big thing, right? I mean, we talk a lot about data classification. I think COVID-19 highlighted company culture. I had a great conversation with Eric Krohn. He's a security evangelist.
Yeah, I know Eric. Yeah.
And this podcast goes live on Friday. So for those listening, go sign up to the CyberHub podcast. Sorry, cheap little thing. Go sign up to our CyberHub podcast. Listen to the conversation with Eric. We talk about deepfakes, but we also talked about the culture at KnowBe4. And he was talking about how every morning at 9 a.m., no matter what, Stu gets on the line. Everyone gets on a call at 9 a.m. Eastern. And Stu tells his employees everything that's going on in the company. Open book. Every morning, every single day, even during COVID.
Right on. Right. I think as CISOs, we're often asked to create this security culture as though that's something that we can create in a vacuum, and it turns out that that's a crazy idea. Culture is something that lots of people come together to create, and so if your leadership isn't behind it, if it's not top down and bottom up grassroots, you're going to have some challenges. And so one of the things I did for the book, I wanted to do some research to kind of back up some of these weird, findings that I was putting forward. And I did. And so the culture one is, I think, one of my favorite concepts, but there's this leadership saying, it's culture eats strategy for breakfast. It's a famous Peter Drucker quote. And, the idea is, these executives come into companies, they make a lot of money, and they want to come in and put this new strategy forward that's going to change and revolutionize the world. And as it turns out, all of them fail, and they fail because those same executives don't take into account the culture of the organization and whether the culture will tightly integrate with that strategy. And they don't look at they don't have empathy for the employees to understand what they're going through, to put themselves in their shoes, or to let those employees bring good ideas forward. So I thought, okay, well, probably culture eats cybersecurity for breakfast too. How would I test that? So I looked at all the companies that were breached in 2018, and then I cross-referenced that data with the culture ratings on Glassdoor. So if you're not familiar with Glassdoor, you can rate your current or former employer by 1 to 5 stars, right? And as it turns out, if a company has a lower than average Glassdoor rating, you're 3 times more likely to have been the victim of a data breach. And so this is amazing to me. Maybe it's a dumb moment, in some ways, but it's amazing because it's across every industry. It doesn't matter the size of the company. It doesn't matter, what technology the company used. If there's a predictor out there that's 3x that makes a difference, that's huge in terms of cybersecurity. And all those same culture scores also translate into higher productivity, higher earnings, better revenue, so I think it just reinforces that culture is a leadership issue, and I think cybersecurity is a leadership issue, but it really has to be something that everyone at the company embraces and values, and company-wide meetings are just one way of creating and influencing culture, but yeah, there's so many things you can do to make a difference.
A ton of them. When we look at, and kind of, we're almost out of time, so we're going to have to skip a few chapters. So for those people who are listening, you're going to have to get the book. The link is below in the description box. You can go pre-order the book now for WellAware Master the Nine Cybersecurity Habits to Protect Your Future. We're going to skip over a few of these, so you guys are going to have to get the book to read them. Okay. I'm not making any commission by doing this, folks. I'm just trying to be respectful of everyone's time. Because I'll probably get that tweet at some point or another, like, why didn't you go over everything? Well, because we don't want to give away the whole book. We do want you to get it and support Jordan's hard work in the book.
I'll have two notes. So the first is I've personally made a commitment to donate half the royalties I get from the book to support COVID-19 related charities, so homeless shelters or food banks. And I think, again, as cybersecurity practitioners, as leaders, this is our calling. Right, this is our time to make a difference. And the second thing I'll say is I'm going to start a masterclass for anyone who's bought a copy of the book in October. So it'll be a 10-week course, the 9 habits plus an intro chapter on habits in general. But again, I want people to engage, and if you really wanted to get into the diligence chapter or mirroring, we'll have a deep dive on those on the masterclass.
So you talk a little bit. I want to go to deception real quick because I promised people we're going to take 5 minutes to talk about deceptions first. So stick with us. So you talk about deception, and you said something like this. I'm quoting the book here.
Okay.
As security practitioners, we need our users to trust us. Ultimately, using deception should create more trust in the business, not less. A very, very interesting outlook, and the context of it is when you're sending a fake email, letting people letting him know, hey, we're going to start a campaign to test you, and you consider phishing as deception, and a lot of people wouldn't consider phishing as deception. Phishing is training, right?
So I think the users feel like they're being deceived. So if you're on the receiving end of deception, you're in deception. And I understand, traditionally from a security practitioner point of view, that's not a deception technique. But I think when you're talking with business executives, when you're talking about implementing a deception program, there is that reticency to avoid deception, right? We want to build trust. We don't want to feel like we're tricking people. And whether it's the Trojan horse, whether it's if you're a study of the Civil War, the Quaker gun affair, deception is a tactic that's been used for thousands of years. So while I think you need to play fair especially when you're dealing with your employees or people. We could certainly do things that would come across as being perceived very negatively, and I think that's the point. Is we don't want to burn our bridges that we built with all the other habits when implementing deception.
So one would argue that cybersecurity is based on deception. I send you an email as a cyber criminal. I'm deceiving you to open a link. I'm deceiving you to enter your credentials. Once I'm in your network, I'm trying to deceptively deceive your AV, your sensors, your security programs in place, your defensive programs in place to move laterally within the network to export data. To me, cybersecurity is all about deception. And in that aspect, right, Tony would love to hear this, I'm sure. But what I say is someone's getting deceived every single day, every minute of every single day in cyber. Either a cyber criminal is being deceptive because he fell into a honeypot, he fell into somewhere where they've trapped him, and now he thinks he's getting a trove of data, but really all he's getting is a bunch of XYZs with 555 phone numbers, right? Or he's getting data that isn't even relevant at that point, just data that you can throw away. or the companies falling to the deceptive nature of a cyber criminal who's attempting to defraud the company either of data, money, resources, or whatnot. But cybersecurity is purely deception. And it's deception not in the realm of I'm opening a company and you're buying stuff from me deception, but rather it's the deception where it's the invisible enemy. It's the whole idea of just staying away from people, right? And you know, not even stepping foot in a business, but being able to deceive them out of money or data that's rightfully theirs.
Well, and in a way, one of the reasons I felt, you know, that including a chapter on deception is so important is because, you know, in a way, you know, we need to take the gloves off from the defenders to be able to employ deception back at our adversaries. And if we're not doing that, we really won't have a complete security program. And you know, I talk about Umesh in the story, Umesh Ram, and he you know, he talks about his implementation of deception technologies. You know, we all kind of, I think, have struggled with you know, finding the needle in the haystack with our SIMs or with our MSSPs or what have you. And I think, you know, deception has the exciting, I think, potential to really have the needles come to us in a way, right? So if we can filter through that noise with deception to find the real bad actors, and we'll maybe go back and take those IPs that we see in our deception tools and look and see if they've been anywhere else, right? So we still need those other tools to be in place, but if you know, if we have a better source of real you know, malicious activity, deception, I think, can get us there, right? And whether you implement that with technology or whether you know, have a digital watermark or footprint or you know, all the other, you know, breadcrumbs or what have you that you can do with deception, or even if it's just you know, as simple as a process to validate identity or something, all of those things, you know, are so much more powerful in a way in defenders' hands than you know, if, again, we don't want to handcuff ourselves by not doing deception. I think we have to work it into our daily habits.
I completely agree. So we're at the favorite part of the show, folks. We've picked George's brain on everything on this book, excluding the chapters on diligence, community, and mirroring, which you're going to have to order the book to get, which you can do in the link below. I'll tell you something. I've read a lot of books, and I've had several authors on the podcast, and I've been outraged. But the Devil in the Beltway by Michael was a book that outraged me simply because of the overreach of the FTC. And when he was finally vindicated a year and a half ago, I was ecstatic for Mike. And Graham's book on the Equifax breach outraged me as well, because you know, you're seeing systematic organizational failures and institutional failures take good people out. And your book was very uplifting in the aspect that I really enjoyed reading it, because it was just spot on. It was practical. It's not written in a too technical, like, if you're a CISO, buy this book, give it to whoever you report to, and be like, hey, read this, because it's a great little segue to kind of help the people who may not live in the cyber realm get an idea of the habits that you need in order to be successful in the cyber realm.
Well, and I mean, again, I had an argument with a CISO last year for a Fortune 50 company, and you know, he said multiple times he's a cynic, and you know, I mean, and you know, I understand that you know, that is a mindset. But if you're in a career in cybersecurity and you think that you're cynical, right? What are you really saying? You're saying that, you know, well, nothing I do matters, right. And that's a horrible thing to do if you're a security practitioner. If you really think you're just, you know, sticking your finger in a dam that's gonna overwhelm you, that you know, what are we doing? Like, why are we in this job space? I think you have to be optimistic to be in cybersecurity today. I think. And that's powerful. We can make a difference and that message that working together, we all can change things. I think that's powerful.
And we've seen it. Our community does come together. The CTI League, Ohad Zeidenberg's group, during COVID-19, that was helping healthcare facilities and hospitals deal with cyber criminals who were trying to take advantage of a global health pandemic, is a great example of a multinational force of cybersecurity practitioners coming together to help each other, irregardless, and cooperate with law enforcement and different governments and so forth. Shout out to Ohad and the CTI League, because they really did do a great job.
Definitely.
So let's go into our Ciso Insight round. It's that time, folks. It's the fire round of the show. We put you on the hot seat. We ask you the toughest questions one can ask a cybersecurity practitioner, like one buzzword you'd want to bury in our buzzword graveyard.
I really hate the term disruptive. I think everything in cybersecurity is disruptive in a way. So obviously every product has to have the word disruptive in it. Putting on my skepticism hat, right? Is it really disruptive? I hate that.
Is it just picking up with the times?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I like that. Well, disruptive, it's the first time that disruptive is in our graveyard. We're going to have to dig a new 6-foot grave and bury disruptive there. That tombstone will be ready in 10 days, folks. Come back and see it on our Instagram page or Facebook page as we prepare the tombstone for disruptive, a first on the show. One technology that will change the way we do cybersecurity.
You talked about it, but I am a big believer in deception. Again, I think there are a lot of reasons why I think it's going to be disruptive. Sorry.
You brought it back. You resurrected the word.
It's not dead yet. It's still it's still a little warm.
The body's still in the morgue.
We
haven't done the autopsy yet, folks.
It's a zombie buzzword at this point. Again, I think deception doesn't have to be expensive, right? I mean, every vendor that I talk to today, just to have a conversation, it seems like, okay, this is going to be a 6-figure deal. I think you can do, some sort of, small implementation of deception. I think you get great alerts. It's a blind spot that, you don't have another way to see. I like deception as something that's going to continue to grow and change. And
folks, that is also a first. So you've got 2 firsts here.
All right.
Last book.
Winner.
What's the last book you've read?
So I just finished yesterday a fiction book. I don't know if you didn't say nonfiction, but so think of space necromancers, right? What's the first thing that comes to mind? Probably Chronicles of Riddick, right? So there's this book by Tamsin Muir. It's called the Lock Tomb Trilogy. So book 2 just came out last week, and I finished it, in just a couple of days. But it's called Harrow the Ninth. So Harrow is the galactic, world famous necromancer. Oh my gosh, it's such a fun romp. Again, like goth, necromancers, with weird stuff going on. It's fantastic. The Lock Tomb Trilogy, Tamsin Muir.
Awesome. Last movie you saw?
So I've had a hard time lately watching movies, but I did sit down a couple of weeks ago and I watched the original Dune. Okay. Such a great movie. Oh my gosh. I had this weird thought in my head that I wanted to take all of the scenes with Patrick Stewart, and I'm a Trekkie, right? So I wanted to take all of the scenes with Patrick Stewart and redo his one of the most famous Star Trek's Next Generation episodes, Inner Light, where he has this whole flashback and he lives his whole life. But instead of that other life, I wanted it to be his life from Dune. So of course I have to rewatch.
Your favorite music?
Man, I have such eclectic tastes. Everything from rockabilly to gangster rap. But honestly, my favorite music, my favorite musician is Dave Brubeck. His Take Five album was radical. I think it came out in the late '50s. But I mean, oh my gosh, the jazz was just mind blowing.
I got a haircut this morning. My barber knows to turn off all ESPN, all news when I come into the barber shop, and he puts on 50s or 60s jazz music, or and that's about it. Because otherwise, I'm like, I can't do this. I can't sit here.
Too distracting. You'll move your head and get the.
No, I just get too outraged. I've lost faith in humanity.
Okay, well, so jazz is our common refuge.
Jazz is our common refuge. Yeah, jazz had no, jazz was just music.
Yeah, no doubt.
It was just good music. One thing you took away from the COVID-19 crisis?
I really, again, I think I've been so amazed to see the culture of our organization at SMU. I think we have a good culture, and I've thought a lot about cybersecurity culture. But seeing how cybersecurity culture and organizational culture dovetail in that way, and some of the cool things that there's so many cool stories about SMU and what we've done. Our quarterback for our team, worked to fundraise for people. We made. In our engineering lab, we 3D printed, face masks for hospitals and other frontline workers. It's such a cool story. There's so many great things that, the community really did rally together to help. And, again, we focus on, a lot of the negatives around it, but seeing the people coming together that want to make a difference, from students to faculty or staff, it kind of pulls at the heartstrings. It really, people want to be safe, and I think again, I have the saying that security is in your DNA. We come together for mutual protection. That not necessarily that we like each other or we don't get in on each other's nerves, but that's how we evolved as a species. Security is in your DNA. And together we can make a huge difference.
Absolutely. George, I want to say thank you so much for coming on the show and gracing us with your presence today. It was absolutely awesome to have you on. Folks, the book is WellAware Master the Nine Cybersecurity Habits to Protect Your Future. You can pre-order it now. Comes out in October. That's only a few months away, folks. It's only a few months away. And trust me, come October, November, you're going to want to read books. You don't want to watch TV or be online. You won't want to. It's bad enough right now when we're not even 90 days. We're like under 90 days out. Like, it's only going to get downhill from here, folks. So just read a book. So get George's book. Get any book. Be literate. First habit, literacy. Read something. I guarantee it'll be better than anything else you get online. That I promise. Or listen to a podcast like ours and make sure you subscribe and give us 5 stars and let us know and nominate a CISO you want us to speak with. That's how we got to George. People told us, hey, you got to check out George. And so we did. And so, make sure you do that as well. That's it for us here this week on CISO Talk. We'll be back with so much more with another great interview next week. I've got a friend who we were supposed to record stuff on during RSA, and then obviously we all know what happened around RSA time. There was a virus that came out of somewhere in the world, China, and it kind of destroyed RSA, and it's destroyed everything ever since. It's been rampant. It's been horrible. It's been disgusting. We have to wear masks to go to Publix and Whole Foods and a restaurant. Like, I don't think there's been a Hollywood, even the worst apocalyptic Hollywood movie didn't have people wearing masks. Because I don't think anyone wanted to see, like, Tom Cruise wearing a mask on screen.
Yeah, that's true. Nobody wants to see Tom Cruise wearing a mask. Right? We got to see his pretty face.
You got to see his face, right? Tom Cruise, whoever, whatever actress, whatever, no one wants to see the actors with masks on their face. And yet, here we are. That's it for us here again, folks, this week. Make sure you subscribe, give us 5 stars. Until next week, we'll be back. Until then, folks, stay cyber safe.